You're listening to Prosper in the Kingdom, the podcast where faith meets practical strategies to help you become healthy, wealthy, and wise. Join hosts John Cleaver and Wendy Lee as they share insights to equip you in your journey toward abundance, spiritually, financially, and beyond. Just a reminder, every situation is unique. The content of this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as specific financial or medical advice.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Prosper in the Kingdom. I'm your host, John C., with the ever-amazing co-host, Wendy Lee. How are you doing, Wendy?
Doing great. Excited to dig in.
Yeah, this is going to be a good episode, guys. We're going to be talking, of course, we've been talking about the Christian wealth revolution, as well as the 3M framework, make, manage, and multiply. That's where the 3M comes from. But today we're going to dive into a little deeper on, what's really going on behind the scenes. We're going to talk about our financial system here in the United States as it's focused on middle class and kind of, what's going on with that. And people are coming to the realization, at least we're trying to put that out there, that the system was never really designed to make you financially free, right? Mm-hmm. Some people, and we talked about this the last couple episodes, but I'm going to kind of just touch on it a little bit, with regards to something feels off for people financially, especially, the working class, the middle class, the heartbeat of America, if you will. They're working harder than ever, making more money than ever, yet that stress is still really high. Debt keeps showing up and financial freedom feels further away rather than closer. And it seems to be getting worse with every generation. I know Gen Z, my children are all Gen Zs and they're at that age now, especially my oldest, where he's thinking about, possibly settling down, buying a house. And it seems like, Dad, I don't know that I can actually afford a house. And so we walk through the numbers and he can, but it's just the mantra that's out there. It's people feel like, hey, you're doing everything that you were taught, which is, let's be honest, is very little, but you still feel like you're falling slowly behind. And at some point, you've got to ask the question, and that's really what we're asking today. Is it you, or is it the system that we've been following, right? And that's what we're really kind of diving in and unpacking today, because the financial system most people follow or are following was never really designed to make you free. If you think about it, kind of pull back a little bit, and we're not going to go full tinfoil hat, but I want you guys to just consider how the system is, the financial system here in the United States is built, right? I know that sounds strong. And it's not about blaming people or trying to sound extreme. This is about clarity, right? Because if you don't understand the system you're operating in, you're going to keep getting the same outcome that it produces, and you're just going to get more and more frustrated. But you got to look at this kind of like the game of life, right? If you don't know the rules of the game and how to play the game, you're probably going to get left behind when it comes to winning at the game, right? And I know some people do, you see them on social media. I think more of those are more fake it till you make it. But, there are people that, kind of break out. I'm one of those. I think I'm doing wealthy. Am I a multimillionaire? By no means. But, I came up through low economics growing up and just figured it out along the way. But it was because of I got tired of not getting ahead and said, okay, I need to know the rules of the game that the wealthy are playing. And that's kind of what it's in. So, Wendy and I are going to dive into this. So Wendy, let's just kind of jump into, this whole system and what's really going on.
Which, by the way, the game of life was one of my favorites to play growing up.
Because it's an awesome game. An awesome game. And there's a lot of application there too. So,
but yeah, one of the biggest things that we need to understand is that the system is working the way it was designed, right? And so we have to learn, like you said, the rules of the game, what the wealthy know to be able to make a shift in our own finances. And so we are in a system that trains people how to, grow up, get a degree, get a good job, make money, spend your money, right? Consumer world we live in, finance what you can't afford, and then repeat. So, and that is, I think, a tool of the enemy to keep us handcuffed. And it's not freedom. And we have to learn stewardship, and we're not going to learn it from school, right? We have to learn what it looks like to handle our money the right way and use our money as a tool. And, we're not going to like accidentally start having more margin in our life, that financial margin we talk about, when debt is just normal, when everything goes on a credit card, when we do the 4-pay option every time we check out, right? And we're not going to build ownership when we're dependent upon a broken system. So, yeah. And so people are behind just because we're literally set up to fail. And you can put tinfoil hat on you want to say it's designed that way because it's the enemy that runs this world wants to keep people oppressed. So
yeah. And that's that's a big part of it. And a lot of people get frustrated, or they just accept it. Like, it goes to that phrase, it is what it is, right? And a lot of people think, well, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And I completely disagree with that. My thought on that is the rich are getting richer because they educate themselves, and the poor stay poor because they don't educate themselves. And that's unfortunately, we as a voting society here in the United States specifically have accepted and have just continued to vote for the same people that they don't put the education in schools, right? As far as financial education. I mean, why aren't we teaching kids how to do the math, how to build the businesses, right? How to become financially independent? What are we teaching them? Trigonometry and social skills and stuff like that, which, don't get me wrong, all that's important. But I think, why aren't we teaching those life skills? Because that's really what's going on. And I think, again, not to go tinfoil on you, but I think it's to keep us dependent and, to keep us in a situation where we go out, and we all know how to create more income, right? That's what they want. The more money they make, or we make, the more money they make through taxation, through everything's a subscription now, right? Even, buying stuff is on a subscription. What do I mean by that? Well, the bank has figured it out. They're going to get you a part of your paycheck through interest and things like that. But let's be real. That's what the system produces. That's what it's designed to do by the powers that be. And, if you follow the system long enough and kind of pull back a little bit and kind of look at it, without the emotion and things like that, the outcomes are predictable. Number one, debt becomes normal, and then it becomes bondage. Most people are spending a portion of their check before they even make that money through debt. And that's why in the Bible, and I'm going to throw out some verses here, but you look at Proverbs 22:7, the borrower is slave to the lender. That's why, because you're working. It's like, well, I'm not a slave. No, you are. If you think about it, you don't have freedom of movement. You got to pay the bills and things like that. Your credit score gets trashed, and then you can't buy anything. Or if you do, you're paying through the nose for it through even higher interest rate. So, that creates the second piece, which is stress, right? And that stress becomes not just every once in a while, it becomes constant. And there's always something due, something coming up, something hanging over you, which keeps you in that scare, that fear mindset of, I can't lose my job, I got to pay the bills or whatever. I'm just gonna do whatever they tell me. If I agree with it or not, who cares? It's a job. And so that is not how God wanted you to live, right? Jesus said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, Matthew 11:30. So you got to ask yourself, your life that you're living now, does that feel heavier than kind of what he described? And I would say for the most of us out there, the answer is going to be yes. I know it was for me before I really started again educating myself on all these different strategies, that the wealthy use, because I didn't want to stay uneducated. I didn't want to stay poor. I wanted to stay, I wanted to get into a mindset of building wealth, not necessarily just money for money's sake. You guys have heard me say it 100 times about it's not about being Scrooge McDuck rolling around in money, but it's about what you can do with that and that freedom. I want to be a free individual, and I know you do too, the listener, right? So what else is there? Well, it's financial confusion, right? There's so much noise out there, and it's even louder than it was 20 years ago, because now you've got Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, all these other social medias where it's like everybody else seems to be doing great, right? Because they're posting their lifestyle, this, that, or the other. You've got people posting about how much money they're making in the businesses of this, that, or the other. But you can do it too, just buy my system, right? Again, the system is designed to separate you from your money. But that confusion keeps people passive. Why? because they don't want to make a mistake. You know, they probably, I know I've done some things like, oh yeah, I'll try that. And, you know, I've been burnt on it, right? Because it's sales, right? Most people are in that fake it till they make it mode, especially when you talk about online or things like that. And they're not really making the money they maybe claim to do. I'm just going to throw that out there. Not that everybody's not, but just going to put that out there. But, you know, Hosea 4:6 talks about my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Okay. And that's what's happening. People get confused, so they don't move. It's almost analysis paralysis. And so they don't do anything. And the next thing you know, that time goes by. It's because most people, like we said earlier, were never taught how money works. So they just avoid it altogether. Or maybe they do try to outsource it, but they still don't understand it. So they just kind of cross their fingers and, well, I'm hoping this works out. And, you know, we had a friend get involved in a business, if you will. And, you know, they invested a considerable amount of money. I think it was like 10 grand, and it was a scam, right? They lost their money, and several other people did too. And unfortunately, that's the world we live in. So that becomes this barrier now of trying something else. And with just a little education, you know, you can avoid a lot of that. So the other thing is the system is designed to have you dependent, right? I don't care if it's dependent on the state, the government, whatever the case may be, you know, or dependent on somebody else is going to take care of it for me. So we don't learn that, and that dependency replaces stewardship, right? And you've got to look at it from the ant, right? In Proverbs 6:6, go to the ant, consider her ways, and be wise. The ant stores up for the winter, right? We know that it's not a matter of if something's going to happen in your life, it's when and how many times, right? I've been downsized 3 times, emergency fund, right? You lose that income, you don't want to be in massive debt, right? So it's like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm out of debt if I get a downsize or something like that. But again, that dependency replaces stewardship. And the other caveat to that with stewardship is maybe you know how to make more money. So you just go, and I've even seen this on social media too. It's like, I'll just go out and make more money. That's not the end game, folks. It's not about chasing money, right? And that's where, you know, you start looking at consumption becomes the goal. Well, they have it. Why don't I? You know, they went out and bought this, even though they may have financed 100% of the purchase or whatever on horrible terms. They've got the item. Why don't I have it? It's like keeping up with the Joneses. And so, especially here in the United States, consumption again becomes that goal. But, you know, Ecclesiastes 5:10, he who loves money will not be satisfied. It's never enough. It'll make you feel good. And I'm sure if you can, I don't know if you can relate to this, you know, you go out and buy something. Oh, I want it. I need it. I want it. You buy it and you're like super stoked. And then that buyer's remorse happens.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter.
It feels good in the moment. And then later you're like,
why did I do that?
Waste.
Why did I do that? Yeah. It's like, oh man. So, you know, that's a big part of it. And then the other thing too, and, you know, I'll kind of get off the soapbox here, but I got a couple more, but you know, number one is that delay, right? Because of the analysis paralysis or whatever case, or you're being taught what I think is a bad strategy, meaning the delay. You know, I'm going to do one thing at a time. I'm going to save up my emergency fund before I go out and start paying off my bills. And I got to do that before I start actually building wealth. Well, that's a delay in time. And it could be 5, 6, 10 years before you actually start investing for, you know, building wealth. That's 10 years you're never going to get back. But on the flip side of that, you start looking at, you know, traditional advisory out there. And it's, you know, when there's a big market correction, and again, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, folks, it's when. It happens about every 6, 7 years on average, right? Sometimes a little sooner, sometimes a little bit longer, but major corrections where it's over 20% down. Okay. What are we told? Hey, don't worry about it. You're going to get your money back, which technically they're not lying. You do, but you don't ever get the years back. And so it may be, you know, 2008, you know, I got my money back in 2012, 2013. That's 4 or 5 years later. That's 4 or 5 years I'll never get back, because gaining money that you've lost is not growth. Okay. That is not growth. Don't ever kid yourself. But, you know, in the last one, I think this really hits home in the Christian community, is that shame, right? That shame of, I don't feel like I'm succeeding, but I don't want to talk about it. I don't, I don't know what to do, but I don't want to talk about it because I don't want people to know I don't know what to do. And folks, that's the enemy whispering in your ears, right? Romans 8:1, there is therefore now no condemnation. A lot of groups out there. I know we're here. We build both the financial strategies with the biblical reference. I don't know that anybody else is really out there doing that. They'll either bring one solution or the other, but to have them both combined, this is no judgment zone. I mean, I think this is our 240 plus video that we've dropped. We've got the podcast out there as well, all designed to help you improve your financial knowledge so you can then do for your family and your extended family. And again, not for building wealth, just for wealth's sake, but what can you do? Imagine if all of us in the Christian community were debt free. Imagine if all of us were able to tithe, not just, 5-10%, but 15, 20, 30%. What can we do? What kind of impact can we make? But none of this is random, right? None of it's random. It's what our system, our financial system produces, and we're seeing the fruits of that system.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, to your point about the shame keeping people stuck. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons it took me a long time to get a financial plan, is I didn't want people to see my real financial picture. And mine, to your point earlier about making money is not the answer. I was making good money and I had nothing to show for it. And it was embarrassing. And it was embarrassing that I was, out leveraged. My debt responsibilities were higher than my income, even though I was making multiple six figures at the time. And so, and I think a lot of people listening can relate to what we're saying here. And if any of that's you, make sure you stay tuned in and get your own financial plan with us, and let's figure that out. But, this becomes a spiritual conversation, like, how we operate in our lives, our faith. In fact, Pastor said it this week, but like, worship is not standing in a church service, raising your hands. Worship is with your life. It's the way that you live your life. And Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world. And this world is going to have standards, and this world is going to have the way that it operates that is separate from how we're called to live and what we're called to do. We're called to live in the world, but not be of it, not be shaped by it, not in our thinking, not in our habits, not in how we build our lives, not in how we spend our money, right? Our salvation isn't just a ticket to heaven. It's to be a light in this world. And that means more than just, going to church on Sundays or saying Jesus loves you or whatever, right? It includes every aspect of how we live our lives, how we worship God with what we do, and including how we handle our money. And I think, important that people understand that that's a part of it. And, back to the shame part, not pushing that to the side and thinking that that's separate.
Yeah, no, and it's not. And that's the point, we're trying to make here. I mean, to take it a little deeper, this isn't just the financial piece that we're talking about. I mean, that's what, we talk about here at PITK, but it's all about alignment of your life, right? Jesus didn't die just to save us. He showed us a different way to live. Early Christians, they weren't Christians. They called it the way, right? And that's the question is, are we living according to the world system or God's design? And I think that's something that, and again, we're not wagging the finger at anybody, but as a Christian on that journey, on that walk, not just in your financial life, but, are you in alignment? That needs to be the question, right? And at some point, this becomes a decision, right? You've got two paths you can kind of take with this. You can keep following the world system, right? The middle class system where you're barely keeping your head above water. You're making it paycheck to paycheck. Maybe you do get to squirrel a little bit of money away because you're outrunning your expenses with income. But that's exactly what you're doing. You're outrunning your expenses. You're not controlling them. You're not being a good steward. And you're in that cycle of earn, spend, finance, repeat, earn, spend, finance, repeat. And because you're outrunning that system or outrunning that debt, the bills and stuff like that, one day you're going to stumble and it's all going to come on you like an avalanche. And, because of all that, we just get into this mindset of, okay, this is just normal. Okay. And you can choose a different way. You can choose a different path, right? A path built on stewardship, a path built on ownership, on financial clarity, on intentional action, because you got to follow it with action. You can't just say the words, you got to do the do's, right? You got to walk the talk, so to speak. And that's where that 3M framework comes in. It's all about, making an additional income, not just for income's sake, because again, if you make more money and it just goes to lifestyle expenditure, then what's the point?
Right.
So it's about making more margin. That's your seed, right? That's where you can start expanding your garden. That's where it becomes management, right? You start managing that seed better. Okay. And then lastly, going back to the parable of the talents, it's the multiply. How do I multiply it? How do I multiply it so I can take care of not just my immediate family, but my extended family, so I can help the church with their drive, whatever fund drive they got going on for a new parking lot, new building, ministry overseas, or whatever the case may be. You can be a part of that blessing now and not say, man, I wish I could. Because I know, in my past, I've been in a situation where, man, I wish I could help that. That's just a great cause, but financially couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I know some of you listening out there in the same boat too. But again, it's all about that make, manage, and multiply. It's not perfect. It's not about being perfect. It's being in alignment, right? It's not overnight, but you're taking those steps forward with intention and again, taking that action.
Yeah. Yeah. And, a lot of people might think it's too late, or they've already screwed it up, or, I should have figured this out a long time ago. But you can literally, with your next payday, start being different. You can start changing the way I've had several moments over the last several years that I'm like, okay, here's one thing I can now shift to get myself closer to, the things we talk about and the things I say I want to do. And it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. It's, I think, one is you have to change your habits, but two, you have to change not your mindset. I'm going to say your identity, and really shifting from I am a person that gets money and spends money to I am a steward of every dollar that God puts in my lap. And when you make that identity shift to partner with the Lord on your money instead of partnering with the world, that's when everything can change.
Yeah. And that's when it all starts to become different. And it's the wins along the road. Again, this isn't an overnight thing, right? And I want to be clear about this, and we'll close with this, but it's not about blaming the system. Okay. And I want you to hear me on this. I mean, we're all accountable for our own actions, our own decisions, right? The system is set up the way the system is set up. So you can throw your hands up and blame the system and just kind of throw in the towel, or you can be one of those people, that gets free from that financial bondage, recognizing what's going on out there. I'm playing the game of life. I see what we're doing here. I'm standing above the board, right? And so now I choose to learn the rules and learn other ways of thinking. And I choose a different path for myself and my family, because you want to educate your kids. And here's the reality of it. You're not stuck. You're following a system. Okay. And you're choosing to do it, whether consciously or subconsciously, you're choosing to follow that system. That's the reason you're in the financial, situation that you're in. And that system is going to produce an outcome. So the real question is, are you going to keep following the system that produces the pressure, the stress, the debt, all that stuff, that financial bondage, or are you ready to learn about a different way that can produce true freedom for you? Not just the financial freedom, but that freedom from stress. Imagine, for those of you that have debt out there, imagine if you woke up tomorrow and all your debt was gone. Okay, that can be your reality, but it's not, like I said, going to be overnight, but you've got to take something, called action to make it happen. And a little bit here, a little bit there, it adds up over time, as long as you're heading in the right direction, mix it with consistency, right? So if this conversation hit you today, do me a favor, give us some love. Click that little like button. If you're listening to our podcast, be sure to give us a 5-star review and share it. Post this on your social media. Help us get the word out. We're really trying to grow this channel, for people who need to hear this stuff, because I'm drawing a line in the sand. I'm serious about this Christian wealth revolution. Teach people the 3M framework so we can free God's people in order to make an impact, not just make an income to pay bills, right? So if you want to hear the full episode on the podcast, you can catch us on any podcast platform. We're pretty much on all of them. I know the big ones definitely were out there, but it's available for you. But like I said, do us a favor. click like, click subscribe, and share. And if you've got an idea you want to hear about as we kind of go through this, we'd love to hear your comments. Just chime in, on whatever platform you listen to this to. And if you've got a topic you want to hear about, let us know. And maybe you can even be a guest on our show. So who knows? But thanks again for joining us at Prosper in the Kingdom. Wendy, as always, it was awesome to have you here kind of preaching the financial news, man. I love it. I love it. So everybody, we'll catch you next week on another Prosper in the Kingdom.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Prosper in the Kingdom. If this episode added value to your day, be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with someone who could use the encouragement. For more resources, head to prosperinthekingdom.com. Let's continue building lives of purpose and abundance, one step at a time.